Nikitich, основатель Carfax Education. Я думаю, как минимум некоторые сидящие здесь, наверное, сидят здесь благодаря этому человеку. Я думаю, кстати, можно провести даже опросик такой в конце, как будет народ подтягиваться, будет довольно интересно и забавно. Также сооснователь The Tutors Association. Поэтому я думаю, не будем тянуть время, сразу начнем. Спасибо, приветствую.
Доброе утро. Я хочу начать с того, что достаточно относительно недавно, ну, по крайней мере, кажется, относительно недавно, руководил русским офисом в университете, когда я сам был undergraduate, и мне поэтому очень приятно, очень лестно быть сюда приглашенным. И особенно приятно видеть так много людей в субботу. Относительно рано утро. Доброе утро. Я сегодня действительно хотел поговорить об образовании. Это то, чем я занимаюсь как бизнесом, и поэтому я хочу начать с того, чтобы говорить об образовании как о бизнесе, о глобальном бизнесе, но также я хотел поговорить об образовании как наверное, чуть на английский, поскольку я не был уверен, какова будет сегодня аудитория, и готовил пак, я готовил на английском языке. Мне сейчас не переводить, могу себя обратно на русский. И если позволите, я, наверное, все-таки сделаю это на английском языке. Вот, what I want to talk about today was education in three aspects: education as a business, education as a passion, and education as a vocation, as a profession. And my starting premise to talk about education as a business is that it is something that is almost universally demanded around the world. Of course, there are tens or even hundreds of millions of people around the world who still are not receiving education in parts of Africa, in parts of Asia, but the majority of people around the world receive some form of education at some stage of their lives. So, in business terms, education, the market for education is massive, it's universal, it's global. We are living right now at a time of unprecedented demand for education, and that's largely tied into another global phenomenon, and that is of what people call emerging global middle class. Very largely, when they say that they're talking about the emerging Chinese middle class, but it's not just in China where this urbanization is happening at an enormous scale, where so many people are being lifted out of relative or absolute poverty and are joining what economists sort of just call the middle class. And it is one of the key defining features of middle class, defining values, is education. Of all the sort of social groups in society, perhaps no one values education as much as the middle class, because a lot of people see education as an opportunity for a better life, for a more rewarding life, for better prospects, better opportunities, better careers, and therefore, and this is what drives demand for education around the world. Just to approximately some statistics, not too much, but just to give the scale of education, and in particular international education, which is what I largely want to talk about. The growth is quite staggering. In 1990, just almost 25 years ago, 1.3 million people who studied abroad. These are people who were born in one country or live in one country and go to study in another country. This is OECD statistics. In 2011, that was 4.3 million. And this year, it's predicted to be 5 million people. I was recently at an education conference, and one of the speakers there produced a big map with arrows and flows of people, of international student mobility. And he said, well, this is the great migration of people. And indeed, the scale is quite impressive. And if you look at where people come from and where they go to study, it's a bit like travel industry in some ways. It's all about origins and destinations. And the larger destinations, if you look at regions, the sticks I have is about regions both as origins and destinations. For instance, Europe is probably the most important one still. 1.5 million students come to study in Europe from outside, and 870,000 leave Europe to study abroad. North America, 840,000 come to study, and 140,000 go from North America to study abroad. Southeast Asia, interestingly, fewer people, perhaps not so unexpected, fewer people come to study in Southeast Asia, but about 700,000 people do study abroad from Southeast Asia. China is an interesting one because China, 300,000 people come to study in China every year, and also about 300,000 people leave China every year to go and study abroad. The Arab world, MENA regions, people from the Caribbean, Middle East, North Africa, 170,000 people every year come to study there, and 420,000 people leave that region to go and study abroad. So yeah, it gives you some sense of the scale of what's going on. In terms of where people come to study from, if we look at talk about individual countries, the largest country is of course China. That's not surprising. Population as it is. At any one time, there are about currently 720,000 Chinese students studying abroad. In the second place is India, with 220,000 students studying abroad. Surprisingly, perhaps for some, Korea, and by Korea, it's South Korea, 140,000 students, Koreans studying abroad. In Europe, the largest country in that sense, it's studying abroad, is Germany with 130,000. And the fifth most important country of origin is Turkey. Put things in perspective, because talking about Russian and Eurasian business today. Russia is third largest country of origin for international students in Europe, with 71,000 students going to study abroad. And it's in third place in Europe behind France, but if you look at the wider former Soviet Union region, Ukraine is the fifth country in Europe with 55,000 students. And together, Russia and Ukraine account for more than Germany. Together, they send more students than any other country in Europe to study abroad. So also, it's interesting to look at destinations where the international students come to study. It wouldn't come to you as a surprise sitting here in UCL that Britain is one of the most important destinations, but statistically speaking, not the largest is the United States, with 17% of the international students studying in the United States. Britain is not too far behind, 13%. And the next most important countries are Australia and Canada, and that reflects the status of the English language as the current lingua franca. But what is interesting is that there are emerging destinations, as OECD called them, and Russia is one of them, with 4% of the world's international students coming to study in Russia. And it's the seventh largest country of educational destination. It may come to us as a surprise, especially for those who have left Russia to go and study abroad. But, and of course, in that statistics, this 4% of the world's international students, it includes Ukrainians, it includes people from Kazakhstan, other former Soviet republics who come and study in Russia. But it still means that Russia is a very important player in the international education market. So this gives you the perspective on the scale of and the size of the existing potential educational market. What's interesting about it is that business plays quite a large part in all of this. Traditionally, we think of education as something provided by the state. But when we're talking about international education, probably the state is much smaller than when they're talking about domestic education. There is a consulting firm called Aleksandr, some of you may have come across, which has a very strong education practice, and they compile a lot of very interesting research and statistics and provide quite a bit of thought leadership on, in this area. And by their accounts, what they call transnational education is a $25 billion a year industry, and it is growing fast over the last 10 years. They reckon it's been growing by $1 billion a year, and so not only it's large in terms of numbers of students going to study abroad, but also in terms of the industry. It is a large industry, and a lot of people do not think about education as a business, do not think of it as a large and important global industry, and that's one of the things I want to address today, is that misconception about this very important industry. As I said, business is playing quite a large part in international education. We are all used to the idea that education is something that is provided, or should be provided by the state, especially when thinking about secondary education, school education. But it's a relatively novel notion that education is a function of the state. 100 years ago, if you think of school education, 100 years ago, here in Britain, something like 98% of school-age children received education for free. Yet there wasn't a single state school. There was no Department of Education. The state, the government, had no role to play in education whatsoever. In Russia, before the revolution in 1917, again, there was very little state provision of education. Of course, the literacy rate, the education rates were not nearly as high as they were in Britain or the rest of Western Europe. But it was only after the revolution and in the 1920s when the Soviet state started providing massive education. It's actually, we forget about it, but one of the great achievements of the Soviet regime was universal literacy and also great advances in public health. But again, it's less than 100 years ago that the state had a role to play in education. And this is where it's coming from, this idea that education should be provided by the state. Some people feel very uncomfortable with the notion of education being provided by businesses, by profit-maximizing organizations. But again, it is the consequence of the fact that most education so far is provided by the state. Yet, provision by the state is not necessarily and always a good thing, not always a safe thing. And here is another parallel. Here in Britain, for instance, there was recently an education secretary called Michael Gove, who made very strong reforms to some aspects of the education in the UK. One of the things that he did was reform the A-levels, tougher. Another thing was a program of converting failing state schools into academies, and some of them were forcibly converted. There were lots of protests in the streets and in the media about that, principally because pupils at those state schools had no say in what was happening to them. Decision maker, politician made a decision, and then everyone in the state system had to live with it. Here's a parallel example from Russia. Some of you may not know about it, but there's, particularly in Moscow, currently there's a program of merging schools and state schools, or most schools in Russia are state schools. And there are a lot of protests about it because in the last 20-25 years there are many schools that merged that are funded by the state, but that are run autonomously, that have experimental schools, that have strong emphasis on mathematics or music provision, and now they've been merged and sort of steamrolled into this common standard, and a lot of people are up in arms, not literally, but sort of protesting, and they're unhappy because, again, they have no say about what's happening to their children in those schools. They have no say in it because these are state schools. Again, education authorities made the decision and everyone has to live with that. And So this is just an example of why education shouldn't always be provided by the state, at least. But what's worth bearing in mind is the states are usually involved in the education of their own citizens. When we're talking about educating foreigners, there is much less ideological opposition to doing it for money and at profit. There are some exceptions, of course. Germany, for instance, provides quite a lot of free education to foreign students, but that's, again, it's a political decision to attract them and Germany, and it's a decision they have reasons to make. Here in Britain, Britain is quite opposite. Again, it's quite few, we would know, overseas students pay fairly significant fees, and even though the universities in Britain, most universities are state universities, state-run, they have no problems charging quite high fees. In fact, a lot of universities in Britain leave off foreign students. I happen to think that there are only about 20 universities in Britain worth going to, and of course this is very much one of them, one of the best here in the world. But there are more than 200 universities in the UK, most of them are what we call rubbish universities, who largely leave, but sometimes I think they only exist to make foreign students for fees. And yet, even in some of the best universities, international students play a very important role. Just last week, the University of Edinburgh, one of the best universities in this country, announced that they have a new target, targeting about 50% of their students from overseas. And the reason they have to do this, because state funding is not enough, they have to attract overseas students' fees. 50% is a very high figure. I don't think, well, there is only one institution that has even higher number of overseas students, and that's the LSE. Also in Cambridge, there are about 30% foreign students. And so even when it is provided by the state, it is still provided as a business. So, and this is just one aspect of it. This is the higher education. There are different segments to education business. There is what is an American term, but it's now university accepted in the industry, K-12, kindergarten to 12th grade, essentially school education. International private schools, very big business. Tertiary education, we talk about universities. Vocational education, again, it's a very big industry in its own and growing. Tutoring, something I know quite well from running as part of our business group, tutor agencies in Britain, in Russia, in Monaco, and some other countries. Education consultancy, advising foreign students on where to go to study, how to prepare. Again, it's an interesting industry. Online education, already quite big business and with massive potential. Education technology, massive industry. And there are many others. What I wanted to leave you with is the impression that education is a big, serious, and growing business. As a business, especially educational institution, the business model is quite simple in its essence. You set up an institution, you put together courses to provide education and charge students fees. So what you need to do, the logic of your business is get as many students as you can, bums on seats. And that's how you make money. But in order to make money consistently, you need to make sure that you always have this supply of students. You have students who want to come and study in your institution. And that means you have to make sure that the education you provide is good. And in the long term, this is the only thing that sustains educational business. In the short term, and here I come back again to private universities, marketing, you can fool people for quite a long time with good and clever marketing, but ultimately it's the reputation, it's how good is the education that you provide that will determine whether the education is a success or not. And here I come to my second theme, education as a passion. And I was at another conference and was a headmaster of a newly formed private school in Malaysia, and he was saying how when they were setting up the school, they had to build a building, they had to design, they were dealing with architects, they had to decide how furnish it, and he was saying, well, this is hardware of our school. Then they had to choose what they were going to teach, the program, whether it's going to be IB or A-level or GCSE, and so that was our software. Except the key thing for us was peopleware. And that's a very important point about education, is that with all the advances in technology, and education technology, as I said, is one of the very important industries in its own right, I cannot yet see a moment in time when the human element will be withdrawn from the equation, where it is still as good as your teachers are. Yes, in the university sector, it's the lecturers, it's the academics, it's the emphasis there is more on the academic qualities, but in other sectors of education, particularly school education, it's the teachers and what their personal qualities are like, and that's why it matters so much. The best teachers, the best educators are not always perhaps motivated by money. They do what they're doing. Really, the very best ones for the love of it. What motivates them is the satisfaction of seeing their pupils succeed, and realizing that they played some part in that happening. Some people, it's almost like an instinct. They have the instinct to help, to serve others, to improve things for them. And as a good educator, you need to have that instinct. You need to want your pupils and students to do well. If you think back to your school days, all of us can think of their favorite teachers, and then you would know how much of a difference they've made in terms of getting you to where you are, in terms of shaping your interests and motivations, and that is something that cannot be replaced with technology or a kind of rationalized away. Someone once asked a very successful teacher who was retiring, he said, well, isn't it a bit like standing in a train station and sort of taking people to the train, waving goodbye and seeing them leave, and do not want to go on the journey with them? And the answer was that as an educator, your journey is exactly that. You take your pupils to that train station, and whatever their destination is, you make sure that they get on the express train. But none of this means that educators and education entrepreneurs can have a good and comfortable life. In fact, I think they should, so that the best people are attracted to that industry, to that profession. The notion of teachers and educating students or poor people doing unglamorous jobs is largely the result of state involvement in education, and thankfully this is changing. The education industry, education profession offers so many opportunities for both for meaningful employment, also for business startups, and increasingly they can afford and they do pay people well, and that brings me to my final thing that I wanted to address today, is to try and interest you in looking at education. It's very worthwhile career as a very good occupation and as a profitable occupation. There is certain logic to why now is the time to go into education, whether as a business or as a new recruit. And the reason for that is that it is relatively undiscovered. It's not the most obvious choice, and this is the great advantage. It's not overcrowded, and because it's not overcrowded, the opportunities are there for the taking largely. For those who are ambitious, capable, well motivated, they will command a premium if they go into that area. The career path may not well be very well defined yet, because there's just so much of it is only beginning to happen as a business. But that's an opportunity in itself. It means that people who go into it will have opportunities to be at the very forefront of the industry pretty soon. And to give an example, even with teachers, there is for international teachers, there's such a shortage. 200,000 teachers need to be recruited by international private schools in the next 5 years. That's just one small example. And there are opportunities on all sides of education business, one that I was talking about earlier. And what I would leave you with is this thought. I know a lot of people think about careers in the finance industry, in strategic consultancy, in other law, perhaps, in more established professions. But there is a very strong advantage to those who go to the less explored areas. And I'm convinced if any of you choose to go into that and do that with passion, it will pay off. Thank you very much.
Hi, I would like to thank you for your speech. I'm a fellow PPE student. I have a question. So, some time ago, Nick Cohen published an article saying that PPE is a crash course, and PPE is found to be one of the most difficult degrees in the UK and worldwide. His argument was based on the fact that half of the MPs, the graduates from Oxford, but PPE graduates from Oxford, and his argument that it's a crash course was based on the fact that you know bits of everything, but you have no specific knowledge. So ultimately, my question is, if there is such a degree which can be counted as a degree to success, which one is that, in your opinion? And how would you comment on that?
I think I read that article, and yes, indeed, they're saying that. Well, it's like true. I remember when I also studied philosophy politics at Norwich University, and I remember when I started, someone said, "Oh yes, well you don't need to study that much. Just read The Economist every week, and you have everything that you need." And this, in some extent, it's true. Some people say it's sort of called a bluffer's degree. But I suppose your question is, which is the most valuable sort of force education to get, and that's some people. Well, it depends what outcome you're seeking from your education. If we are thinking in terms of sort of success and sort of practical aspects, it's not largely tied into a particular degree. It really is your qualities that drive and propel you through life. When people come to ask for advice, for instance, saying, "What should I go and study?" Our advice typically is go for something that you are genuinely most interested in, because whether it's school subjects, or university degrees, or postgraduate studies, because I think it's far more important to study something you enjoy studying rather than something you think will be practically useful. Because if you look at a number of lists of very successful people, big CEOs or billionaires, if you look at what they end up doing, it's very rarely very closely related to the degrees they have taken. Of course, if you want to be a physicist, you need to study physics. If you want to be a doctor, you need to study medicine. But short of going into academia or going into the specific area that you are studying, and that's I think the beauty of the Anglo-Saxon education model is that it doesn't tie you to a particular profession. And the reason we always advise, and I always advise people to go and study something they enjoy is because if they do that, they're more likely to achieve better results, they're more likely to end up at a better university, and they're more likely to have more interesting opportunities afterwards.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Анастасия. Хотела задать вам вопрос. Вот вы говорили про человеческий фактор. Какие сейчас последние тенденции в развитии отношения преподаватель-ученик или там преподаватель. И изменились ли эти отношения за какое-то последнее время, влияет ли на это рынок, скажем так, рыночная экономика?
Очень интересный вопрос, потому что действительно ну, и педагогика, и идеология образования, она очень подвержена, как и многие другие вещи, моде в идеях, я бы сказал. И какое-то время назад, где-то здесь на Западе, в 60-х, 70-х годах, стала распространяться идея того, что вот нужно сделать, особенно школьное образование, то, что называется pupil-centric, и вообще хорошо было бы всех детей посадить, убрать парты, доски, посадить их круг на пол, хлопать в ладоши и делать то, что дети говорят. И я, конечно, утрирую, но по достаточно большому сожалению, у очень многих людей эта идея, как всегда, идея сперва появляется как какое-то новшество, которое призвано исправить недостатки модели, доминирующей на тот момент, модели образования. Но в результате идея растет, пока она набирает обороты, потом она становится сама доминантной. И вот сейчас мы живем в эпоху, когда вот эта идея такого, кто говорит, даже хипстерского образования, она уже не в самом расцвете, но она очень еще сильна. И новшеством звучит призывы вернуться к тому, что более формальной модели образования. Вот есть такой даже, то, что называется dirty word, rote learning, или еще говорят memorization, что зачем ученикам запоминать знания, когда есть Google, когда есть Википедия, когда есть интернет, им важно иметь навыки, а знания совершенно не нужны, потому что их всегда можно почерпнуть из интернета. Но есть очень простой на это ответ, что это все прекрасно, что происходит, когда садится батарейка. И очень интересно наблюдать то, что все больше и больше раздается голосов к тому, что, ну, хорошо, мы сделали эксперимент в 70-х, 80-х годах, мы сделали либеральную модель образования. Как правило, в государственных школах. Вот, например, здесь в Англии очень интересно смотреть контраст между частными и государственными школами. Они вот более подвержены этой идеологии. Они более успешные школы, ну вот с точки зрения того, каких результатов ученики достигают, куда они в дальнейшем поступают, чего они в дальнейшем добиваются, это частные школы. В частных школах вот эта модель либерального образования не так широко распространена. И, обращая на это внимание, люди говорят, традиционное образование, оно работает. Оно достигает тех результатов, которые хотят родители и со временем сами ученики. И моей большой радости, когда ты говоришь с людьми о том, что учитель не только развивает навыки, но передает знания, хотя не смотрят на какого-то нациста. И это меняется. Я не знаю, насколько это отвечает на вопрос, но это вот, знаете, как бы маятник, скажем, колебаний, то в одно, то в другое, а правда всегда где-то в балансе. Простите,
sorry. In London, especially nowadays, it's very common for students at school to get private tutoring. Your private tutoring agency, how have you made it particularly unique compared to the others out there, especially in London?
Well, with tutoring, it's very interesting. It is very, in some ways, it's very generic. Really people who want to tutor, the parents decided that they would like to take a tutor and be private tutor. So there's a business model. It's very simple. The key is in two aspects. It's the selection of tutors. And unfortunately, I like when teachers, with teachers, teaching qualifications, that some form of qualifications a teacher can have that can say that they're competent teachers. It will never say whether they're a good teacher or a bad teacher, because again, that's more than enough rather than science, but at least you can have some sort of competence level. With teachers, one of the biggest challenges, because it is so individual, it's impossible to have any formal qualifications, formal criteria that can predict who is going to be a good teacher for this pupil or for that pupil. Because it's, especially in the context of individual one-to-one tutor, it is someone who's a great tutor for one pupil is a complete disaster for another, because the job of a tutor, I'm just talking about how teachers should definitely be passing knowledge and stimulating curiosity. But in a very individual context, a very large part of tutor does is motivation. And that's down to establishing contact with the pupil. It's down to chemistry, if you like. And there is no form of criteria you can have for that. So the art of letting students and matching tutors to particular pupils is the difference between one tutor agency and another tutor agency.
Здравствуйте, меня зовут Ксения. Вот вы говорили про модель контраста между частными и государственными школами в Англии. И мне бы очень хотелось бы узнать ваше мнение, а в чем заключается это самое большое различие, да, кроме, скажем, extracurricular activities, это quality of teaching или еще кроме этого что-то?
Вы знаете, первое, наверное, что нужно помнить, это то, что очень большое разнообразие и в частном секторе, и в государственном секторе. То есть есть совершенно потрясающие государственные школы, сильнейшие академические, есть школы важные для жизни и здоровья, и учеников, и учителей, и не полицейские кордоны стоят на входе. Это очень большое разнообразие. В Британии 7% детей учатся в частных школах, 93% учатся в государственных школах. Тем не менее, это совершенно не означает, что те, кто учатся в государственных школах, получают плохое образование. Совсем нет. Наверное, самое важное различие – это государственная система, она гораздо более монолитная. Частные школы, они даже в Англии, самый важный аспект не то, что они частные, а то, что они независимы. И каждая школа индивидуально решает, каждый директор решает, что они в этой школе делают, как они это делают. Опасность любой государственной системы заключается в том, что есть единая такая наверху точка принятия решений, которая потом копируется в каждое отдельное образовательное учреждение. Если там где-то наверху принимается плохое или ошибочное решение, сбой дает вся система, страдают абсолютно все. Если такие решения принимаются индивидуально на уровне школы, то там, может быть, плохой директор сделает плохое решение, но пострадают ученики только одной школы, а не всей системы.
Hello. My name is Julia, and I'd like to ask a question. You were mentioning about exciting opportunities in education as a business, and I'd just like to ask, what career opportunities in education did you mean? And don't you think that pursuing a career in education as a teacher, a research fellow, is more competitive in terms of you need to publish and deliver high standards of teaching, and less paid, rather than, for example, choosing entrepreneurship or working in finance?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily agree, because, for instance, if you compare entrepreneurs and teachers, teachers have a predictable income. Entrepreneurs fail. Most entrepreneurs fail. Most startups fail. When you run your own business, you work largely 24/7. When you're on holiday, you're working hard. Anyone running their own business has the luxury to be able to speak of their own experience. I love flying. I love hated the country. I love people who live in the bus. And there is no internet, so that's changing. If you compare average pay currently in the finance sector and the teaching profession, yes, of course there is a stark difference. But that's changing. I mentioned that international schools require 200,000 teachers in the next 5 years. It's a big shortage. There are not many teachers. Typically, they require teachers who come from Britain, from America, from Canada, from Australia, from South Africa. These countries do not produce enough teachers. And by the law of supply and demand, what happens? The pay goes up. One example, Dubai. businesses based there, quite a bit of time there. It's very interesting educational place. 85% of children receive private education. Nowhere else in the world the proportion is as high. And part of it is that the state has more or less withdrawn from the state itself. Next week they're celebrating 43 years of the country. It's so new that the state hasn't had time to establish itself in every single area. And even state schools are run by private operators. But there, tax-free environment, relatively good climate. It's very important to sun, but otherwise the sea, there's the sun, a very attractive lifestyle. The teachers are paid quite well. And when you compare it to the sort of average day finance industry in London, remember about 40% tax, or 50% tax. And that's London, because the Western world is worse. Whereas teachers, especially with international, that's just one aspect of it, with international teaching. It's an interesting career because it's an opportunity for people to go and work in one country for a few years, then another country for a few years. It's an opportunity to go and see the world, but that's not the main motivator. The main motivator should be that they should aim to be good teachers, and if they are good teachers, they will be paid well and will be very much.
Спасибо. Да, все нормально. Спасибо огромное за этот интереснейший инсайт. У нас буквально 2 минуты перерыв, и мы переходим к следующему гостю. Спасибо.